Once we decide we need to create some layers, the place we want to visit is the Layer Properties Manager. This is our one-stop shop for creating, managing, and manipulating the layers in our drawing. Now, I recently launched my AutoCAD. I happen to be sitting in the default drawing1.dwg. This drawing has absolutely no content. What I'd like to do is create a simple drawing, and I'd like to organize my geometry onto some layers. So I'm going to create a layer. I can do that by going up to my Layers toolbar, and I'll click on my Layer Properties Manager icon. When I click that, AutoCAD brings up my Layer Properties Manager. Now, if we look at the dialog, I can see up at the top, AutoCAD is saying our current layer is Layer 0. That means that anything that I draft right now will be drawn on Layer 0. I can also identify the current layer by this little green check. Now, if I move down into this lower area, I can see all of the layers that are in my drawing. Right now, I only have Layer 0. Layer 0 is kind of a special layer. Every drawing will start with a Layer 0, and we always have to have a Layer 0 in our drawing. We cannot rename Layer 0, and we cannot delete Layer 0. Notice next to my layer name, I have several settings that are associated with that layer. Now, these settings are organized in columns, just like in Microsoft Excel. Unfortunately, sometimes our column headings aren't wide enough for us to see what the setting does. If I'd like to adjust the width of a column heading, all I have to do is move my cursor up between the columns. When my icon changes, I can click and hold, and I can drag such that I make these columns wide enough that I can read the heading. Now, every one of the settings in this list can be adjusted just by clicking on it. Now, we're not going to go through all of the settings. We're going to go through the ones that are most important to us right now. We'll look at some of the others in future sessions. Right now, this very first setting, our light bulb, this is our on-off setting. This controls the display of the layer. If I click this guy, I will turn the layer off. Now, since this is the only layer in my drawing, if I was to click this now, AutoCAD says, "Hey, are you sure you want to do that? You're turning the current layer off." Well, you know what? I want to keep the current layer on, so I'm going to click yes. Let's look at this setting. This is our color setting. This controls the color of our layer. If I click on this color field, AutoCAD will bring up my color picker. From here, I can select from any one of the 255 colors available in AutoCAD. I'm going to come down and click OK. We'll close the color picker. I've got a line type selection. If I click here, I can set the line type for my layer. We'll get into this guy in just a little bit. Moving down, I've got the line weight area. If I click on this selection, I can choose a plottable line thickness or line weight for my drawing. We'll talk about this guy more when we get into plotting, but this is where we can adjust our plottable line weight. Let me close the dialog. If I'd like to create a new layer, I can come up to this icon. This is my new layer icon, and I'll click. When I do, AutoCAD will create a new layer for me. It even names it. I'm going to change the name. Layer 1 is not very descriptive. I'm going to use the name Object. So we'll just type in Object, and I'll hit Enter. I'm going to change the color of this layer too. I'm going to come over and click my color selector. And when my color picker comes up, I'm going to move over and I'm going to select the yellow swatch. I'll click on the yellow swatch and I'll click OK. I've just created a new layer and I've assigned its color to be yellow. Let's set that layer current and we'll draft something on it. If I want to set the layer current, I'm going to make sure the layer is highlighted and then I'm going to come up and click the green check. When I do, that layer is now current. Anything I draft will be on that layer. Let me come down and click OK. We can also see the current layer at the top of our screen. And I'm going to draw a square using the rectangle command. So I'm going to come over to the draw toolbar and we'll click the rectangle icon. We'll pick a point on screen and I'm going to draw this using dimensions. So we'll right click and we'll select dimensions from the menu. And my length for rectangles, I'm going to use 5. Enter. My width will be 5. Enter. And then let me click to set my opposite corner. I'm just going to click in space right here. Notice I've just created a square on my screen, and that square's yellow. Why is it yellow? Because it's on a yellow layer. Let's make a change to our layer. If I want to change my object layer, I'm going to come up to my Layer Properties Manager and click. When the dialog comes up, I'm going to change the color. I'm going to click the color selector. And this time I'm going to come down and I'm going to click the red swatch. We'll click this guy and click OK. I have just changed my layer color to red. I'm going to make another change. Let's change the name. I'm going to double click on the name field and I'm going to type in part. This will be my part layer. And I'll hit enter. Let's click the OK button. Notice my square now looks red. That's because the layer is now red. Let's assume that this square we're looking at is a block of wood. And maybe I've got a hole drilled through this block from top to bottom, and we're looking at it from a front view. Well, from a drafting perspective, that hole drilled through the block would be represented using hidden lines. Let's create a layer for our hidden lines. I'm going to come up and click my Layer Properties Manager. Notice my part layer happens to be highlighted. When I click the new icon, notice the new layer that AutoCAD creates has the same settings as the layer that was highlighted. I can use this to my advantage if I'm creating multiple layers and I want them all to have the same setting. So let's give this guy a name. I'm going to call it Hidden Lines. I'll hit Enter. Let's come down. We'll change the color. I'm going to click the color selector. And this time we're going to grab the magenta color swatch. I'll click OK. Now, since this layer is going to represent hidden lines, it's going to need a hidden line type. So I'm going to go to my line type selector and click. And from here, I can select any line type that happens to be loaded in my drawing. Now, since we started with a blank drawing, the only line type we have is continuous. So I'm going to come down and click my Load button, and let's load a line type into the drawing. When I click Load, AutoCAD brings up my Load or Reload Line Types dialog. If I click and hold my little scroll bar here, I can scroll down and view all of the line types available with our installation of AutoCAD. So fortunately, they're alphabetical. I'm going to come down to the hidden lines. I actually have 3 choices. The only difference between these guys is the size of the dashes. I'm going to grab the standard hidden line and click OK. I've just loaded that line type into my drawing. From here, I can now select it and click OK to apply it to my layer. All right, let's make this layer current, and we'll create the hole through our block. I'm going to click my little Set Current icon. That makes the hidden line layer current, and we'll click OK. Now let's assume that the hole that's drilled from top to bottom through our block has a diameter of 3. Using those dimensions, we'll create that hole. I'm going to launch my line command, and I'm going to draw a line from the midpoint of the top of the block to the midpoint of the bottom. Now, I don't have a running object snap set for midpoint, so we're going to have to grab it from the toolbar. So I'm going to click midpoint, and then I'll come over and click my line. Then I'm going to come over and click midpoint, and I'm going to click the lower line. When I'm all done, I'll hit escape. Now I'm going to create the hole by just offsetting this line either way. Remember, the hole is being drilled from top to bottom, so from a front view, it's just going to be represented as 2 vertical lines. Now that I know where the center of the hole is, I can merely offset this line to the left and to the right to find the edges. I'm going to launch my offset command. I'll come over and click the icon. What's my distance? I'm going to type in 1.5. Since I know the diameter is 3, I'll have to offset this 1.5 either way. I'll hit Enter. Let me select this object, and we'll offset it to this side. I'll click this object, and we'll offset it to this side. When I'm all done, I'm going to hit my Escape key, and then lastly, we'll erase this line. Let me click Erase. We'll grab this line and hit Enter. I have just created a simple drawing of a 3-dimensional block that happens to have a hole drilled through it from top to bottom. I also placed my entities on logical layers so I have control when I plot or when I work on this drawing. Now that I've finished my drawing, I'm going to save this to my hard drive. So I'm going to come up to my File pull down. I'm going to select Save As. And I'm going to go to my Exercise Files folder. We'll come down to Chapter 10. That's where we're working. Let me open this guy up. And I'm going to call this drawing 02_properties finished. And I'll click Save. Whenever you're adding geometry to a drawing, ask yourself, is this something that needs to be a different line type or line weight? Is this something I may want to turn off when I print my drawing? If your answer is yes, you'll want to visit your Layer Properties Manager and create a new layer.